Hi. Hi, good morning everyone. We are going to start the third session of this ALS workshop. Our first speaker today is Rosario Osta. Rosario Osta is a full professor of genetics at the University of Zaragoza in Spain. Professor Osta is the group leader of the line of research on ALS and another neurodegenerative disorders in the laboratory Bio. Research in the Osta laboratory focuses on characterization and search for biomarkers in animal models and samples of ALS patients, and Professor Osta is also interested in possible therapeutic strategies based on cell and gene therapy. Rosario, when you want, you can start.
Thank you. Okay, thank you, and good morning, everybody, first, okay? Thank you for the invitation for the meeting, and I want particularly to thank Eva and Javier. And when the title speaks the long work from the clinical characterization, insight from 20 years of research in someone 893 miles in La Familia. Juan Javier invited us to this meeting. Our group decided to speak about our experience in this animal model from 20 years. Unfortunately or fortunately, we work normally a lot with this animal model, with its light and its shadow. In this room, everybody knows that we have two big problems in ALS. The first is we don't have a therapy, normally because we don't know the pathology, but we can try to extend the motor neuron survival or even maintain the skeletal mass and function. The other big problem is we need the good biomarkers. Biomarkers for diagnosis, prognosis, and predictive biomarkers. The object of our group is translational research, but we are in a veterinary faculty. And then we work with the animal model. The classical animal model for the disease. The transgenic mouse that overexpresses the SOD1 human mutant gene in position D93A. Of course, we go with the Complutense and patient samples. We know the limitation about the model. It is true, because the first, the animal model is not the same with the patient for ALS, even if the patient are diverse. The second problem, in our model, I think in several models, even humans, the women and men don't have the same characteristic. And finally, this year, the ethical committee are more severe about the experiment. We try to follow the guideline, but sometimes it's not easy because the guideline used a high number of animals, and sometimes the ethical committee don't like, and it is expensive too. Okay? We work in the same way every time. For therapeutic strategy, we perform the clinical studies, we do a pattern, and we look for a company, and this last objective is not easy. For biomarkers, it's similar, but the difference is we work in collaboration with several hospitals, and the pattern sometimes is not easy to do. About the therapy, we try to extend the motor neuron survival or maintain the skeletal muscle. For this purpose, we have worked in 3 therapeutic strategies. The first was the neuroprotective effect of pregnancy of fetal toxin. The non-toxic proteolytic cell fragment of tetanus toxin retain the retrograde and regenerative transport across central nervous system, and it is neuroprotective. After going intramuscular injection of naked DNA according to for TTC in the animal model, this is naked gene therapy, we have observed that the protein reached the spinal cord, delay the onset by 8 days, and increase the survival by 16 days. Moreover, this improved motor coordination, as you can see in the slide, for rotor test and hand-wide test. Moreover, we have observed too that the treated animal have an increase in the number of motor neurons and decrease the reactive macrophy. At molecular level, we have observed that TTC restore apoptotic survival pathway in ALS model. You can see CASPAS3, BAX, PEKT, whatever. To improve this neurotrophic effect for TTC, we have made different fusion with two neurotrophic factors, DNF and TNF. Unfortunately, the protein fusion no show any synergic effect in this animal model. About the translation, we have obtained 3 patents. First patent was made in Pathological Institute 1997 and was presented to selectors. The company retained the patent during 10 years. But finally, the company abandoned this patent in 2007. The result project with this patent was the characteristic from TTC to reach the central nervous system with activity enzymatic. TTC as carrier. 10 more and we have nothing after. The second patent it was obtained in 2007 and it's about the neuroprotective effect of TTC. This patent was presented to Janus Development. The company changed name after to Biospherium Biomed, and they work to found a big pharma to reach the clinical trials. Unfortunately, in 2016, they abandoned too because big pharmaceuticals weren't interested in getting to the clinical trials. 10 years more. The 3 patents, we have observed that beneficial effect in skeletal muscle to TTC. Even if it's no specific therapy for ALS, we can improve the muscle in the patients. We have this patent, we have do this patent in collaboration with Biospherium Biomed for 2014. Okay, after several times, the company sends its policy about therapy. They aren't interested in this kind of therapy anymore, biological therapy. Okay, we have a problem with the pharma. But I don't know if you know the Aragonese people like cabezones, big-headed, I don't know in English. And we were 100 convincing the pharmaceutical company, but what we can do? Maybe we can to attract the interest of biopharma to reach different applications for this therapy. We have studied 2 different diseases, spinal muscular atrophy and ischemia. About the first therapy, we are stopped because, first, the animal model is not good, well, in our opinion, and unfortunately, researchers are developing now a better therapy based in genetic correction. the result about ischemia was fantastic, but the problem was the injury in the animal was made after the therapy with TTC. And now we are working to apply TTC therapy after ischemia injury. Okay, after 10 years, we don't want to give up this therapy and to be continued. Now we are going to sign a contract with a company, even if we don't have a patent, to try to reach phase 1 clinical trials. But I can speak more about this. The second therapeutic strategy was cellular therapy in ALS. Why now cellular therapy? Because we have made a PhD, Raquel Manzano PhD, she is here, and we have demonstrated that the muscle satellite cell activity, stem cell in the muscle, is deregulated in SOD1 G93A skeletal muscle from presymptomatic stage to terminal stage. Two questions. First, intramuscular transplantation of stem cell in animal model could be therapeutic. Second, what kind of stem cells should be using? We have decided to use the bone marrow cell because it's easier to go to the patients. And we have made the intramuscular injection of bone marrow cells, and we have demonstrated that this transplantation extends the lifespan, you can see here, and increase the neurotrophic factor expression in skeletal muscle in the animal. This is in D3 for treated animal, and this is DNA. Okay, about translation. We done this work in collaboration with Dr. Salvador Martinez del Instituto de Neurociencias de Alicante. And I thought that they are performing on phase 1 clinical trial using this therapeutic. But yesterday, what is Eva? Told me that now it starts the phase 2 clinical trial using this therapeutic. This is the different hospital, Alicante, and Arisaca, and of course Salvador Martinez, and I think the next week the clinical trial starts. Third strategy, drug repurposing in ALS. Another time, why this change? Okay. The cost of introducing a new drug in the market is high, and the big pharma want to use a drug used to a disease for a different disease. It's less expensive. In our case, we want to stimulate muscle regeneration to maintain the muscle in the animal model. When we choose the GSF, granulocyte colony stimulating receptor, the commercial name is Neulasta. Neulasta is commercialized to bone marrow transplantation, but several groups describe that it promotes mobilization, proliferation, and differentiation of hematopoietic stem cells, and it stimulates two neuronal differentiation of other neuron stem cells in the brain. But what happened? What about the muscle? What happened to the muscle? Because several papers describe that this product can improve the regeneration in skeletal muscle. Before performing the preclinical trial, we have to do the culture in the animal model, in the satellite cell of animal model, and we have observed that each product stimulated satellite cell proliferation. After GSF and intraperitoneal administration, we have observed that this product made to the survival of animal was extended, and we have observed too and reduced in muscle denervation with a different band. Regarding to translational research, we didn't know, but several groups work about this therapy. But the results are contradictory. We don't know a lot about this, but the conclusion is this. In Germany, in 2011, one group described that this therapy is a feasible approach for the disease. But in 2015, an Iranian group concluded that this is not a promising option for the treatment, even it may accelerate the disease progression in women. Another time in 2018, another time in Germany, they think that this treatment is feasible and safe for ALS patients and may exert its effect for neurotrophic, neuroprotective, and regenerative activity, mobilization of hematopoietic stem cells, regulation of pro- and anti-inflammatory cytokines and angiogenic factor. About this, our interest, if the therapeutic effect of GSCF could be as a consequence of bone marrow mobilization, this is the question, and if that was the case, reducing the hematopoietic stem cell pool should have opposite effect, and we have used the antineoplastic 5-AU. Okay, surprise. Not only the animal saw less, the animal lived longer. You can see here the therapy delay, the disease onset, and stands survival for animal model. After the surprise, we are very happy because our objective is treatment and therapy for ALS, but we have a little problem with this. We didn't money. We need funding. Then we decided to go to crowdfunding. The title crowdfunding, Getting Well for the ALS, looking for a treatment. Fortunately, the crowdfunding worked well. You can see here, for Spain it's okay. And this model of Kinase is being used to understand how this product works in the context of ALS. Until now, we know that 5-AU significantly modulate different cells in the blood and non-significantly modulate motor neuron survival, reactive gliosis, muscle function, muscle power relation to the disease, and now we want to observe its effect on protein aggregate, neuroinflammation, microRNA. Okay, in parallel at that time, like IFU is a drug used in clinical for chemotherapy, we want to do a compassionate clinical trial in our region. But the problem was it's an antineoplastic drug. And we want to know if lower doses for 5-FU are effective too. Then we made a pilot study. I smell the tape. We changed the animal house. We moved to a clean animal house. It's PF environment. And it's better for the animal now. Okay, pilot test showed that lower doses are as effective as original dose. This is the original dose, and 100 was effective. Not in the survival only, even in the weight. This is a marker for the progression. And we performed the preclinical study, follow guideline, and nothing. We didn't observe any effect, negative result. First recommendation for this model, never do a pilot test in this model. It's only money and time. Do you remember? In the new animal house, we have a lot of problem with the animals. I could speak for hours about experience. Second recommendation, consider the animal house facility influence, even if it's a more controlled environment. After 1.5 years of work, I am going to summarize resume with 5 FU. The mice born is the therapy environment. The therapy doesn't work. This improves when the animals are born in a more dirty environment. You can see here. And was statistically significant when the environment is even more dirty. This is significant. In this slide, you can see the average for the different environments in the control untreated animal. We are confused, we are disoriented, we are lost. What's happening? Maybe the animal has an innate immune system, but the big question is, are these animal health recommended for the preclinical study? Maybe for the therapies related with the immunity? I don't know. We will come back to the question at the end in my talk. Okay, move on for another problem in ALS, the biomarkers. I know there are several people in this room that they don't understand why study biomarkers in animal models. I can hear the sentences. The animal model represents the genetic ALS. This is true. So one G93H mice have the human mutated gene, but the same symptoms may be also the pathway are similar to spinal ALS. It's better to go directly to the patients. That should be the best model. It's not true, because until now, there is a lot of variation in patients. Moreover, in the animal model, we cannot try all tissues and serial biopsies to study along the time. We work in the same way every time. We take the serial sample in the animal, expression, number of cells, and we observe the variation, and we make a correlation with the animal longevity. We selected the biomarkers, and we translate to patients in the first step to Hospital 12 de Octubre with Alberto García Redondo, and after, in the second step, with national and international hospitals. We have studied different biomarkers. The first is mRNA in muscle and blood. This study started in 2005. We have do macro arrays in the muscle in the preclinical study. Preclinical study is not presymptomatic stage, okay, in the muscle. We have observed that expression level of this gene were deregulated. The most dysregulated genes were tested along the disease with the different stages. And we observed that most of them were regulated, you can observe here, in several stages of the disease. But only 5 genes, the expression level of 5 genes in muscle biopsy, MET2C, GSR, collagen 19, calmolin 1, and sortinoxin 10 correlated with the longevity of the animals. This work was translated to the patient. We performed a multi-center study, and Chris Calvo is in the room, and she knows a lot about this. But a multi-center study, we recollect the samples from Spain, France, and Italy. There are 2 168 individuals, and we have 147 patients. We have studied 2 tissues, muscle biopsies and blood, and we have 3 different studies, 2 cross-sectional studies and 1 longitudinal study. At molecular level, we have observed that in skeletal muscle, collagen 19, protein and gene expression was a strong biomarker to support diagnosis. We can see the expression level, gene levels, respect to health and other neuropathies. And this is protein expression in the muscle. In blood, not only collagen, but MER2C and sortinase 10 were also identified as biomarkers to support diagnosis. At prognostic level, I have the problem to explain this slide. Low levels of collagen 19 were associated with a slower progression of the disease and a better functional state of the patient. Collagen 19 was a good prognostic biomarker because, for the same ALSFR score, the patient that had a low level of collagen lived longer. This is blue line. But the patient with the high levels of collagen lived shorter. Less. Okay? About microRNA in plasma. This one is Janet Urbone, is here too. We have studied the microRNA in animal model in skeletal muscle. And we have observed that fast fibers show a higher difference for these biomarkers. It's normal because the fast fibers are more effective. Until now, we can say that microRNA 206 is a potential circulating biomarker candidate for ALS, because in animal model worked good, well, but in patient we have only preliminary result. We can see this high expression in patient, then we need more patient and control. We have used to the cells like biomarker, hematopoietic stem cell and monocyte in blood. We can observe that CLP, common lymphoid progenitor, and CNP, stem cells in blood, have correlated with the longevity in the animal model. You can see here. Therefore, they were identified as potential circulating biomarker candidate for ALS in animal model. But when we tried to translate for the patient, we observed that the hematopoietic stem cells were not detected in ALS patients. It's normal now, yeah, because this cell they like to alien, and then we didn't not do the translation. About monocyte, we have observed a high correlation between monocyte number and longevity in the animals. But you can see here, non-inflammatory monocytes show a positive correlation. More of this cell we found in the blood, the animal lived longer. Contrary, when you have more inflammatory, when you observe more inflammatory monocyte, the animal lives shorter. We're waiting for the translation to the patients. And finally, cytokine in plasma. Several papers describe the cytokine as a biomarker, but the results observed are contradictory. Okay? After a lot of work, 1+D, a lot of money, and frustration, our conclusion was circulating cytokines could not be good prognostic biomarker in a mouse model of amyotrophic lateral sclerosis. Then, there are poster outside because we tried in the patient too, and we've observed the same result. And we don't waiting for the translation. Do you remember the patient, maybe it's not the good model for the disease because there is a lot of variation in patient? Okay, to change this, an European consortium has been created, the Trical Consortium. Okay. One trial goal is to provide a better characterization of ALS patient. We think, everybody thinks, that this will increase our chance of finding and better biomarkers and treated for ALS. The new Trical Consortium website will launch the next week. 7 November. Finally, I'm going to it's no conclusion, opinion, recommendation about this to you take home. In our opinion, there are two major problems in ALS to translate the result of patient. The first, the results obtained in the animal model are not replicated in patient. The second, although the results that are validated in human by research, biomarkers, pharma is not interested in ALS because the disease has a low prevalence. About second point, we cannot do much. We can first to try to apply this therapy in another really disease to increase the interest for the therapy. We can change our strategy according to their need. Maybe in early 2000 was innovative therapy, gene therapy, cellular therapy. Now is ground repurposing. After maybe innovative therapy, we can do this, but not more. About the first, this problem is not only in ALS. There's the same problem in cancer, nanomedicine, but this is a question of probability, depending on the number of clinical trial performed. If you have 100 clinical trials in cancer and 5 in ALS, it's possible you can try one therapy for cancer and not for ALS. Okay? We have a problem with this. But about the model, our recommendation, when if possible, we try now in Zaragoza, but do not perform the clinical trial in animals. It's important increment variability using hybrid background in the model because it's close to the patients. No pilot study, follow the guidelines please, because we don't waste money and time if you make the survival test. And conduct of 2 sex and blind trials. About therapy, we recommend perform preclinical tests in several laboratories, even in the same animal model. And it's good to perform preclinical tests in several models, or in several models in several laboratories, okay? And about biomarkers, we recommend to perform preclinical tests in serial samples. we think that we work in this condition. I think it's more likely to be translated to the patients. And finally, I know this is money. We know that the SOT1 model is not perfect. And now many other models are appearing, and we are excited to see exactly how they evolve. But if you worked well, knowing the limitation of the model, also the SOT1 model can provide information with potential for clinical applications. Okay, and finish. This is the team. Ana Cris Calvo, Janet Olgonen, and Raquel Manzano are the junior researchers. They speak much better the English than me, and maybe science better than me too, but this is senior, Pilar Zaragoza, María Jesús Muñoz, and Javi Miana. They work in the first time about the TTIP therapy, and now we have 5 PhD study, but the work so there is Laura Martinez and Miriam, okay? Different collaboration, close collaboration with Alberto and Jesus, and with Xavi and Jose Aguilera. This is a specialist in tetanus toxin, and different people in Pasteur Institute, Lidia Montadas, Salvador Martinez, Antonio Musaro, Lidia Han, several hospitals in Spain and Italy. And the most important collaboration for us, and thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you, Rosario, for your interesting data. We have time for a couple of questions. Any questions?
Hi, I'm Ernesto. My name is Silvia Corrochano. I've been working in Harvard Institute, which is basically a mouse genetics center in Oxford for many years. So I've been dealing with mouse issues for a long time. So just a few comments. I think just because I have these issues as well about the importance of using a specific mouse model, whether it's good, it's bad, is it the right one or not. And we've been having this discussion obviously all the time. A few things. There's no perfect mouse model, because it is a model. So we have to consider that we are not making humans, we are having mice. And mice are mice, yeah? And so as long as your conclusions are not, we cure ALS, that's not the conclusion, is we are studying a particular biological process defined by this model we are using. And then if you want to extrapolate more, then you use other mouse models, or different models, or Drosophila, or cells, or humans. But the problem is the conclusions we make. So we cannot generalize so much with one particular study. That's, I think, is the biggest problem we all have. It's like clinical trials. It's not a preclinical model with one particular mouse model. You have to use all the different mouse models. And none of them are actually perfect anyway, because we are modeling. And most of these diseases are sporadic anyway, so we are actually using genetics. So it's not perfect, and that's the main thing I want to say. And about hybrid backgrounds.
Sorry.
The hybrid, so using different backgrounds.
Yeah.
So in that sense, for example, if you use a particular background inbred, very controlled, homogeneous, that's again very good because you can control the variability. So you are defining one particular outcome or one particular process you are measuring, yes? But if you want to represent more variability, more genetic variability, then the USA at the moment are obviously working in collaborative cross or this, which is much better in that sense. And again, it depends on what you're looking for, what's important. So we cannot really say, oh, this is not good. Well, this is not good for what? I think that's the main thing. Thank you.
I can try to respond in English, because my English is not very good. I agree with you. I agree with you. But in my opinion, about the first, maybe I can explain good, but our recommendation is use different models in different laboratories. not only one model or two models in the same laboratory. The first, agree. And Complutense and IPS, okay? But the problem with the third, we don't have immune system, we don't have a lot of hormone, okay? And have a background, in my opinion, is good. It's good because American people, Spanish people, Australian people are hungry, okay? And the environment is different. And I think you must to put in the worst condition to study. I know we cannot use the LS with the mouse because we didn't know the cause. It's difficult to cure. But in my opinion, the hybrid is with the model. I agree with you with the genetic background, and I like the hybrid background to increase the variability.
Could you please comment a bit on the collagen? What is the function of the collagen you found? You found the collagen, Col19A, in your muscles. So what is the function of this specific collagen type? Is there some, and especially do you see any relation, for example, to CK? Is the CK also elevated in your animals?
I tried, but if not, Anna can speak for me. The function of collagen-19, we didn't know. And creatine is higher. Oh, we can.
Okay, collagen, we don't know exactly the role on ALS, but we know, as recent or many articles published, that this kind of collagen is involved in the membrane integrity of muscle, mainly. You can even found this gene or even protein in blood, but in the case of ALS, we don't know exactly the role. We know that patients that show or exhibit higher collagen levels, gene levels in blood and in muscle, the functional state is worse. And the change, the variation on the score, on the ALSFRS score during disease progression is faster. So it's a prognostic biomarker of a worse condition in these patients. But we want to go more in depth on the role of this collagen because we think it's interesting even to monitor and to stratify or characterize different groups of ALS patients. And about creatinine, okay, we don't have studied in depth this marker. We know that it's elevated in ALS patients, but we don't know exactly in our conditions because we haven't studied more in our patients.
In our patients, we see the
variation.
Okay, one question more?
I really appreciate the overview of the mouse models. I just want to comment on one thing. You made a statement that pharmaceutical companies are not interested in ALS. That's actually, and I can't speak for Spain, that's actually not true right now. We have an annual meeting in the United States. More than 80 companies have shown up that are interested in ALS. We have at least 10 new drug trials in the United States next year for new drugs for ALS. So I've been doing this for a long time. There's an unprecedented number of companies now that have become interested in ALS. I don't know if it's not because of models. They recognize the problems with models. Part of it's the biology of inflammation that Dr. Balo talked about earlier. It's the advances understanding C9orf72. Probably 2/3 of these companies are interested in neuroinflammation, at least the ones coming to trial. But the bottom line is there's really a huge interest by pharma in ALS, which is a change from the last decade.
I think I understand. is fantastic. I want to know the company for show it my strategy therapeutic. It's okay, but the question is not compared, but the company are interested in ALS, this is good. I think it's more and more. I don't know why, because maybe neuroinflammation, maybe, but the other disease has a lot more money. It's an optimism message, and it's good for the patients, but okay, we must to ask more and more. Thank you very much.
Thank you. We have to continue to... Okay, our next speaker is Ana Martínez. Ana Martínez is a research professor at the Centro de Investigaciones Biológicas in Madrid, where she heads the Translational, Medicinal and Biological Chemistry Group. Dr. Martínez trained in organic and medical chemistry, focusing her current interest on neurodegenerative disorders. In her research, Dr. Ana Martínez works between basic science for the discovery of new drugs and applied science, and her studies have a marked translational content. The efforts of her group are focused on the discovery of innovative drugs with novel mechanisms of action for the treatment of different neurodegenerative disorders, including ALS.
So thank you very much, Carmen, for your presentation, and Javier and Eva for your kind invitation to this very interesting meeting. And so I am going to try to share with you this morning our results in protein kinase inhibitor as a new therapeutic approach for ALS. And this is a research line that we started 10 years ago. So mainly, as everybody knows here in this room, amyotrophic lateral sclerosis is a neurodegenerative disorder of the central nervous system. That means that share three characteristics that are common to every neurodegenerative disease, three properties or three characteristics that are not good. That means progressive loss of certain part of the central nervous system, in that case, primary and secondary motor neurons. ALS and every neurodegenerative disease has an unknown etiology, and there are no effective treatment for these pathologies. This is a very important issue for all the neurodegenerative disease, but it's crucial for ALS because, in fact, it's a fatal disorder that starts with clinical symptoms that muscle weakness and control loss of the muscles needed to move, speak, eat, and breathe. That finally is the final death cause of this patient, from 3 to 10, 12 years after diagnosis. So we know some molecular pathology of ALS, and we know that as every neurodegenerative disease, ALS is a proteinopathy. We know that since 1993, where the first aggregate of superoxide dismutase 1 was found in motor neurons from patients. And this is crucial for research in this field because, although, as we have just explained by Dr. Osta, this model has different problems and shortcomings, but there was a revolution in the field because since the discovery of these aggregates and the mutation that SOD has, the research in ALS was more intense. So this discovery produced a great advance in molecular research, but until the moment, as we have just been explained by Dr. Osta, there is bad translation to the clinic. In fact, there are no good translation to the clinic because there is no treatment that works on patient in that moment. So during this meeting and in these 20 years of research, there are a lot of protein, aggregates of protein that has been discovered in motor neurons patients. There are aggregates of foods, there are aggregates of the peptide repeated protein encoding patient with the C9 or 72 mutation. But mainly, from our point of view, the big revolution is to find accumulation of TDP-43 in more than 95% of patients, from sporadic and also for familial origin. So, since 2008, when we start our research, we focus our attention on TDP-43 modulation. TDP-43 is a nuclear protein with multiple function and in transcription and repression. And in physiological condition, TDP-43, which is a nuclear protein, lives in a well dynamic equilibrium between cytoplasm and nucleus and cytoplasm. But this dynamic equilibrium is well balanced, and in that case, TDP-43 exerts its function in modulate different genes. What happened in pathological conditions? There are many post-translational modifications of TDP-43 in the cytoplasm, because we don't know why, but there is a shuttle from nucleus to cytoplasm, where is the activity place of the cell. And so TDP-43 suffer different post-translational modifications that start with cleavage products, ubiquitination, aggregates and reduction in solubility, and also hyperphosphorylation. So our working hypothesis is to try to find small molecules that are able to recover the TDP-43 homeostasis. This idea to modulate TDP-43 with small molecules is now more necessary, because we know that this proteinopathy is not only present in familiar and sporadic ALS patients and frontotemporal dementia with TDP-43 inclusion, but also it is present in other rare diseases like Alexander disease, Berry syndrome, hippocampal sclerosis, chronic traumatic encephalopathy. And very recently, and we need to be with attention and focus in that, TDP-43 is gaining an important role in Alzheimer's disease pathology, and in this year it has been described the limbing predominant age-related TDP-43 encephalopathy as probably the main dementia or neurodegenerative dementia in older patients, confounded with Alzheimer's disease sometimes. So, for all these diseases, there are no effective treatment, but the hope, or the small ray of hope, is that there are some small molecules that are able to modulate the homeostasis of TDP-43, like export inhibitors, autophagy modulators, stress granules modifiers, and also protein kinase inhibitors. In our laboratory, we are working in different strategies. We have now different autophagy modulators and mitophagy modulators to be applied for this pathology. Also, we have compounds able to modify NFR2 signal pathway and with influence in stress granules. But today, I am going to focus in our results in protein kinase inhibitors. In 2009, the first kinase reported in the literature able to phosphorylate TDP-43 was casein kinase 1, that now is a good target for many other neurodegenerative diseases. But after that year, the well-known JSK3 with a prominent role in Alzheimer's disease years ago was also described to be involved in TDP-43 phosphorylation, and the group of Brian Kramer in Washington University has described the role of cell division cycle kinase 7 and tau tubulin kinase 1 and 2 in the phosphorylation of TDP-43. Now in our group we have a small or focused chemical libraries targeting these 4 kinases, and everything wants to design, synthesize and develop small molecules with molecular weight below 500 Dalton, with kinase selectivity, and with properties that below the brain penetration. So we are talking and we are discussing models, animal model, cellular model for ALS. It's a tricky point in this moment. And in our research group and with the help of Dr. Ángeles Martín Requero, we have developed and characterized a new cellular model based in blood samples from patients. In that case, we obtain lymphoblasts and immortalize when they are very well characterized. So now we have a small biobank with more than 40 controls, more than 30 samples from sporadic patients, and we have different familiar ALS samples. 6 belongs to the SOD mutation and others. So this only is possible with the collaboration of Alberto García Redondo and the Hospital 12 de Octubre, and with the group of Adolfo López de Munain and Biodonostia. So we have characterized the lymphoblast of sporadic ALS patients regarding TDP-43 pathology, and we have shown how the phosphorylation is increased in sporadic patients in all the forms of TDP-43, in the longer and in the truncate form. And what is more important, and if you see here with this immunostaining picture, we can see how in the healthy control samples, TDP-43 is located in the nucleus, but in the ALS patients, in sporadic ALS patients, TDP-43 is in the cytosol. So we have started characterization of our familiar samples, and we have shown that in the SOD, for example, we see that TDP-43 is present, but by the moment we don't observe any increase or difference in TDP-43 and phospho-TDP-43 relating controls. So if you want to see more about this difference about the SOD population and familiar population, visit our poster number 3, in where we have found also very interesting and difference in NRF2 signal pathway. So, how we can discover new drugs for targeting TDP-43? Mainly inhibit these protein kinases. We have used a reverse chemical genetic approach. That means the following step. So we select our protein that we want to interact with, and in that case, these are our kinase, CK1, CDC7, TTPK1, JSK3, we will talk about our result later. And we need to implement some method to determine the activity of this enzyme in our laboratories, in our case, aluminescent assay development, and so in other kinases we work with external companies. So the next step in this approach means to select and to screen over our protein different molecules, and we have used our own chemical library, which is an in-house chemical library that we grow up with our work since the last years, long time ago, And so we select a focus chemical library focused on diversity. And finally, when we have the hits, we need to demonstrate efficacy in cell or in vivo assays, phenotypic change. And so we have selected the phenotypic change in decreased TDP-43 phosphorylation, and for that we develop or we use an assay based in this human neuroblastoma cell line and the increase in TDP-43 phosphorylation produced by ejaclinic acid. So, from the heat to the final lead to be developed, we perform a lot of medicinal chemistry programs to modify the heats, increasing biological potency and drug-like properties. So, regarding the CK1 inhibitors program, our first hit was this benzothiazole with an IC50 in low micromolar range. We perform a vast medicinal chemistry programs that we have now more than 100 of new small molecules with different scaffolds, different heterocycles, different lengths in the chain that join these two aromatic fragments, and we have more than 50 compounds with IC50 values in the nanomolar range. We study by molecular modeling our compounds, and the first approach say that they may bind to the ATP sites. This was experimentally checked, and effectively our compounds are ATP competitive, and very recently, last week, we have obtained a crystal structure of our compound with CK1 that confirms that our inhibitors goes to the catalytic site and have a pocket, an hydrophobic pocket, where the trifluoromethyl group fits perfectly and increase activity, which confirms our structure relationship conclusion until the moment. When a protein kinase inhibitor is ATP competitive, the problem that may arise is selectivity regarding different kinases that we have in the organism. So we assay these compounds, two of these compounds, in more than 450 different kinases, and as you can see here, they are very selective, and potency are increased in the CK1 family. So these compounds were assayed in our ejaclinic model, and as ejaclinic acid is able to decrease cell viability produced by the toxicity, mainly for TDP, increasing TDP-43 phosphorylation, our compounds are able to rescue these neuroprotective, so are able to rescue the death produced by ejaclinic acid. And moreover, when we look inside what's happening in phospho-TDP-43, we see how ejaclinic acid increase levels of TDP-43 phosphorylation, and these levels are reverted, are decreased after the treatment. So the first model where we tested our compounds in vivo was a fly, a transgenic fly, that overexpressed human TDP-43 on brain, and this is neurotoxic, and the span life is decreased. We treated the flies with different inhibitors, with different potencies, similar in the scaffolds, but with different potencies, and we observed a nice dose-dependent, not dose-dependent, potency-dependent span in the lifespan, increase in the lifespan of these flies. So, moreover, we know the role of neuroinflammation in the ALS, and so we try to look what happened with this kind of compounds in astrocyte and microglia with these primary culture are exposed to LPAs, so are reactive and inflammation response. And we saw how every compound or the compound of this family are able to decrease the inflammatory activity in primary astrocytes and microglia. So we test our compound, the proof of concept, in our models based in human cell-based model. And we see how the ALS patients, sporadic patients, have an increase in TDP-43 phosphorylation regarding healthy subjects, and how the treatment with the compounds are able to decrease TDP-43 phosphorylation. And moreover, we see how, again, the treatment with this protein kinase inhibitor recover the localization, the nuclear localization of TDP-43. These are in sporadic patients. In our group, mainly in the group of Dr. Martin Requero, have experience in lymphoblasts from frontotemporal lobar dementia and from TDP-43 patients. And in that case, they know, she knows that increased proliferative activity due to an increase of CDK6 and enhance of accumulation of cytosolic TDP-43. So this is the lymphoblast, immortalized lymphoblast from a patient from frontotemporal dementia that with the treatment of the compounds decrease proliferation. Of course, we can think that may be a toxic effect, but we test that there are no difference in the cell cycles with the presence of a CK1 inhibitor, so decreased cell proliferation. When we look for phospho-TDP-43, we see how our compounds are able also to reduce phospho-TDP-43 levels in patient samples, and how the compounds are able to promote nuclear localization in this kind of model. So recover the TDP-43 homeostasis. It is very interesting that not only recover nuclear localization, but also recover the functionality of TDP-43, because it is known that TDP-43 regulates CDK6, yes, and we have tested how by gene and protein levels of CDK6 are decreased after treatment of our inhibitor. So recover functional TDP-43 homeostasis. That's important for us, and we move to test if our compounds are able to decrease TDP-43 phosphorylation also in an in vivo model, in mice model. And this is a work, and every result that I show regarding animal models are in close collaboration with the group of Dr. Eva Delago and Javier Ruiz, and we test our compounds in this transgenic animal that overexpress human TDP-43 ubiquitously. So we treated the compound, and we observed a better healthier state, because the loss of weight was less pronounced when the diseased animals are treated with the compound. And after, we see how we recover motor neurons. So there are a neuroprotective activity in motor neuron, measured by two different techniques, NISL and choline acetyltransferase receptor, and also decrease inflammation. So we are seeing more or less what we have forecast previously with our experiments. And what is very relevant, when we determine phospho-TDP-43 levels, we see how in the animal model this phosphorylation is increased and how it's reduced after the treatment in a spinal cord region. Very recently, with the help of Dr. Isidro Ferrer, we have determined how our CK1, delta and epsilon expressed in different samples, spinal cord and frontal cortex of sporadic patients, and we have shown that the isoform delta is overexpressed both in frontal cortex and spinal cord of ALS patients. That for us is a good indication to move further the compound. So we start to study the pharmacokinetic parameters, and we know that the compound reach the brain, reach the target, which is the brain. As you can see, both after IP and also oral administration, we obtain high levels of compound in plasma. But what is very important is that it's a compound that has a ratio brain to plasma 3 times more concentrated in brain than in plasma. So we perform the first safety test to give the green light for further development, which is the AIMS test, and we show that the compound is non-mutagenic, and so our candidate has efficacy in cellular and animal ALS model with good pharmacokinetic profile and good genotoxicity safety to be developed to further clinical trials. This is a huge of money, as Dr. Ostak had mentioned, but we are now looking for this business model, and we hope that this compound may reach clinical trial in the next years. What about CDC7 inhibitors and TTPK1? More or less, we have followed the same strategy, and the results probably are less developed. For example, we screen our chemical library over CDC7 activity. We found the first hit with an IC50 of 2 micromolar in the protein kinases, and so we have done a lot of modification in the chemical structure with a focus library on CDC7 inhibitors of more than 70 different compounds. We know also that the compounds binds by molecular modeling to the ATP site, and we have tested experimentally our CDC7 inhibitors are ATP competitive, but again, they are very selective to a panel of 50 different kinases. This is CDC7, and this is the percentage inhibition at the same concentration. So we have tested the neuroprotective effect of many of these compounds in the tacrinic acid experiment, and those that has neuroprotective activity, we have evaluated if this neuroprotection is due by the decrease of TDP-43 phosphorylation, and they are working well as we expected. So our inhibitors have neuroprotective effects in etacrinic acid, decreasing TDP-43 phosphorylation. We tested, by the moment, we tested these compounds in other transgenic animals that overexpress human mutant of TDP-43 to the Brian Kramer group. And in that case, what we have done is the same that in the fly model. So that means put the compound, the inhibitor, in the medium, so the animals eat the compound. And so we have shown how there is a decrease in TDP-43 phosphorylation in the different animals with different concentration of the compound in the medium, and also we observe a recovery in the behavior because these animals move with different curves, and so the movement is recovered. So to move to the next part of my talk, I have a lot of data about CDC7 and TTPK1, and I recommend you to visit our poster 18 and 19 to see more about all these kind of compounds. And now I'm going to move to JSK3 inhibitor that I said before. We have another strategy to move and to discover these. So when we enter in the field in ALS research, this is something that we know that there is a multifactorial etiology and a complex interaction between genetic factor and molecular pathways. And there is an increase in oxidative stress, there are glutamate cytotoxicity, release of inflammatory mediators, aggregates, SAOD aggregates, TDP-43 foods, as we have mentioned. So this is a multifactorial pathology that, and probably we will need a multi-target compound, multi-target protein to modulate, to avoid all these kind of defects. So in that moment, we are working with this proline-threonine kinase, GSK3, and we have experience in development the inhibitors in the Alzheimer's field. And we notice in that moment that GSK3 is involved in all the process, more or less all the process described in ALS pathology. Moreover, GSK3 beta is also involved in neurogenesis, and the papers that we have found in that moment show that there is an overexpression of this kinase in a spinal cord of ALS patient and also in frontal temporal cortex. So, as I have mentioned, we have a great experience in the design and synthesis of protein kinase inhibitors, mainly in GSK3, and we have now a full chemical library of small molecules that are able to modulate GSK3 not only but ATP competitive mechanism of action, but also in a substrate competitive manner. We have covalence inhibitors, irreversibles inhibitor, allosteric reversibles inhibitor, so we can modulate the target by different binding modes and by different chemical scaffolds. With this focused chemical library and valuable chemical library in our hands, we decide to develop in that moment a cellular model that somehow are able to mimic some of the pathology of ALS, and we decide to use the human neuroblastoma cell line, but in that case, producing the cell death by this amino acid, which it is very well known and shown that cause ALS in the human being. So we define the doses and the time where LVMAA is needed to add to this cellular culture, and we define that this produces a cell death with increased GSK3 levels and with TDP-43 pathology increase, means increased truncation, means increased phosphorylation and ubiquitination. And we treated this model in a chemical genetic direct approach. That means treat with many different compounds as you have seen here, but the only common property of these compounds is that target GSK3 in vitro. And you can see that in every case we can see a neuroprotection. So we use the same toxin to produce an sporadic, or try to mimic an sporadic model of ALS in vivo, and we select rats. We test different doses and times to provoke neurological impairment, and we see that with 2,000 milligrams per kilo, only administered during 5 days, in day postnatal and 20-day postnatal. So finally the model developed this neurological damage. When we go to the electronic microscopy, we see a healthy motor neurons that are completely damaged in the treated model, and all the cellular organization is completely disrupted after the treatment with the neurotoxin. Moreover, when we use caspase-3 immunostain joined to gold balls to see, we can see how there is an increase of caspase-3 immunostains in spinal motor neurons of treated rats that are showing increasing of neuronal death. Also, we saw that GSK3 and TDP-43 are elevated in this model. And in this model, we treat with one of our GSK3 inhibitors, and we use, we treated with the toxin for 5 days, and after the toxin was in the animal model, so we start the treatment with our inhibitor, and we follow 2 different therapeutic ways. The early disease treatment, so we just start the treatment in the moment after neurotoxin administration, and starting in the day 36 where there are neurological dysfunction. So at day 99 we sacrifice the animals, and we can see how the early disease treatment doesn't work. Early disease treatment doesn't work, but when the late disease treatment doesn't work, and when we treat in the early disease treatment, the animals didn't develop the neurological dysfunction. So we know that ATP non-competitive JSP3 inhibitors may be promising drugs for the treatment of several diseases, and in that case we believe that they are good drugs for ALS treatment. And so we're looking for biomarkers, for specific biomarkers, and with the unit of Carlos III Hospital, leading by Jesus Mora in that time, we determine levels of JSP3 in peripheral blood mononuclear cells of patients. And we saw how the clinical symptoms of patients measured by ALSFR score are, the patients are bad when JSP3 are high. There is an important association with the clinical symptoms and levels of JSP3 in plasma. So we thought in repurpose one of our JSP3 inhibitors that are in clinic, in clinical trials right now. This is Titalucib. Titalucib is a selective and ATP non-competitive JSP3 inhibitor. It is safe in patients. There are many patients that have received Titalucib without any side effects. There is a dose-dependent efficacy, and there is a target engagement confirmed. So, for example, in a group of patients of paralysis supranuclear, in progressive supranuclear palsy treated with the compound, we can see how there is a dose-dependent decrease in atrophy in the treated group, and in a small group of patients of Alzheimer's disease, we have shown how the treated patients show a reduce in phospho-tau in CSF. So we propose that Titalucib merits to be repurposed for clinical trial phase 2 for ALS. Firstly, we work with this compound in our cell models, and we have shown how Titalucib decreases TDP-43 phosphorylation in the neuroblastoma cell culture. Also, we analyze which is the state of JSP3 beta, which is tightly regulated by phosphorylation in our lymphoblasts from sporadic ALS patients. And we saw how the inactive form is decreased and the superactive form is increased, meaning that we have an increase in the activity of these kinases in sporadic ALS patients. So we treated with the compound and recovers levels of phosphorylation, TDP-43 phosphorylation, and also nuclear localization of the protein. And finally, we have done an in vivo treatment in our transgenic model, and we have shown how Titalucib is able to decrease TDP-43 phosphorylation in vivo. This data was presented in the last NCALS meeting last May, and was seen by a neurologist from Ulm that now is in Switzerland. And we have she has designed a clinical trial, phase 2, with Titalucib, funded by Swiss money. And now the first letter of intention has been approved, and we hope that finally the study will be approved in the next month to start the clinical trial. So my conclusion, I would like to show you that TDP-43 may be a good target to provide disease-modifying drugs for ALS and other TDP-43 pathogens, and by the moment there is no compound, a small molecule at least, targeting this protein in the clinic. So I try to show you how some protein kinase inhibitors have a key role in reducing TDP-43 homeostasis. Also, I have shown you how immortalized lymphoblast is a good human-based model to study TDP-43 pathology, and how tidelucid is a good candidate to be repurposed, and CK1 inhibitors to be developed as innovative therapeutic agents for ALS. So, all this work, it's impossible to be done without a very committed team. Thank you to all my team. Most of them are here in the room. Also to my close collaborator, Ángeles Martín Requero, that trusts and joined. We work jointly since the last 5 years. The team from Complutense University Biology Faculty that developed the sporadic animal model, and my team in Rouen and in Washington with the fly and the worm transgenic mouse. And of course, I need to thank all the people that in that moment are engaged in the ELA Madrid program, which have us this money and this project, I think, has opened a new hope in every of us, and we are trying to join together, and we are advanced a lot in the research. This is my other findings, and to all of you, thank you very much.
Thank you, Anna. Very nice talk. We have time for a short question. Any question? No? Okay.
Okay, so very nice. No, the only question I have, very quick one. So sometimes these phosphorylation events, they have a physiological role. Right? For example, during axotomy. Are you afraid that maybe the treatment with these compounds is going to interfere with some of the physiological functions of these?
Obviously, we need to perform different toxicity studies in the animals. By the moment, I could expect, as for us, or for me at least, the most surprising result is not the decrease of TDP-43 phosphorylation that was expected. For me, the most surprising result is the recovered homeostasis, because TDP-43 entered in the nucleus and is functional, repressing the different genes. In that sense, I think it is function in the proper direction. Obviously, to start development, what we need is to do the toxicity studies, but I am thinking that based on our data with tidelucid, that it is safe in patients, no problems, Matthew. Because in fact, we have treated, for example, the PHP patients have been treated for 12 months without any side effects, and the Alzheimer's disease patient for 6 months. And now the compound is in autism spectrum disorder, and the young adults has been treated for 6 months without any side effect, and in myotonic dystrophy, where we have not only not observed any side effects, but we have observed a recovery in the mass of the muscles of these patients. So the compound is almost ready to be approved for myotonic dystrophy and congenital myotonic dystrophy. And so, in fact, based on that result, I need to say that I'm confident that they are not to be toxic by this mechanism of action.
Hi, very nice talk, Anna. So, if I'm right, besides the regulation of the phosphorylation state of TDP-43 with CK1, do you have any data in the microgliosis? Do you have any data about the modification or the potential modification of the onset of the survival in mice?
The onset of
The onset of the disease? Is some modification of the onset of the disease or the survival? Because
in fact,
what I saw was a gain of weight
yeah,
and a regulation of the microgliosis.
yeah, okay. So for each animal model, you need to evaluate what this animal model is able to give to you, no? And in that case, in this model, that overexpressed TDP-43 under the prionic promoter, we start the treatment at the 60 days postnatal, 60 days. And we cannot reach longer than 90 days. Why? Because overexpression of TDP-43 is in all the organisms, and when it's expressed in the gut, and finally the animals dead by that. And so, in fact, they are very bad by the gut expression of TDP-43 and the intraperitoneal injection of the compound every day. So we have not observed any more survival. We have now the team of Eva and Javier have shown that when some kind of food is changed, they can prolong a little more the survival of the animals. But this is something to fight against the overexpression of TDP-43 in the gut. So no survival, but our objective is to test that TDP-43 is decreased in our target organ, which is the spinal cord.
Okay. And the other question about the immunomodulatory role of the inhibitors, did you measure something else about that? I mean, because it's nitrates only, and astrocyte and these microglia were cell lines or were primary
culture, and the inflammatory activity is increased by the addition of LPAs, and we determine only the decrease of nitrites production after treatment with our compounds. And now in vivo, we have shown that there is a decrease also in the astrocytosis and microgliosis in the spinal cord.
No, I'm talking about particular molecules.
No, by the moment. We have a long way to study, but with our code in CAF, compounds in clinical trial, because this is the ray of hope for our patients. So we try to build a solid hypothesis to go further, but we have a lot of research to be done. So how are this immunomodulation to test in another animal model to see if they work, but these are many things that may run in parallel with looking for funds to start clinical trials.
Thank you.
Thank you. We have no time for more questions. If you want, maybe in the coffee break.
Okay.
We continue with the session. In this case, the next speaker is Eva del Lago. Eva del Lago is a professor of biochemistry at the Complutense University of Madrid and director of the Instituto de Investigación en Neuroquímica. Professor del Lago is the group leader for the line of research on endocannabinoid system in amyotrophic lateral sclerosis and frontotemporal dementia in the cannabinoids and neurological disorders research group. Research in the del Lago laboratory is focused on the study of the neuroprotective potential of cannabinoids in these disorders and the study of the molecular and cellular mechanisms that underlie this potential. Eva, when you want.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone. And I'd like to thank all of you. You're present in this meeting as part of the organizer of this workshop. Our group, our field of research in our group is a study of cannabinoids. And during my talk, I want to propose you a new therapeutic strategy to delay disease progression in ALS, that is targeting one of the key elements of the endocannabinoid system, the receptor type 2. But let me introduce a little bit the system. Cannabinoids are more than an ingredient of the cannabis sativa plant. They allow us to discover a new endogenous system. And in this process, have an important role Professor Meshogan and their colleagues, that they isolate different compounds of the plant. One of these compounds was beta-9 TSC. That is one of the major compounds of the plant, together with the cannabidiol, CBD, and TSC is the responsible of the minor effects, psychoactive effects of the plant. But now we know the existence of the core endocannabinoid system. This system is formed by endocannabinoids, receptors, and enzymes of synthesis and degradation. But let me tell you a little bit more about the receptor. There are two main receptors, the CB1 receptor that is located in the central nervous system and peripheral nervous system. And you can see here it is expressed in several tissues, and they can modulate neurotransmission. This is an important function in the organism. The second receptor is the CB2, that is we are going to talk in this presentation, as is mainly present in the immune system and is restricted to certain population in the central nervous system. But an important point is that it is overexpressed under pathological condition. And for example, it is overexpressed in microglial cells in response to neuroinflammation. However, our knowledge of the endocannabinoid system is increasing in the last years. And as you can see in this slide, there are more and more receptors that are included in the system. Some of them was orphan receptors at this moment. Some of the receptors that have been incorporated is GPR18, GPR55, of some related receptor as the TPR1 vanillin receptor that are activated by the endocannabinoids. Here we have a schematic representation of the endocannabinoid system. We have the endocannabinoids that are small molecular lipids that are produced on demand, and their targets are the CD1 or the CD2 receptor. But one important point is that we can modulate this system. First, we can use plant-derived compounds, as you can see here, BTC, CBD, etc. But also, we can use synthetic compounds. And for this type of compounds, we have several types, agonists, antagonists, in which we can modulate both CB1 or CB2 receptors. Another important strategy or pharmacological strategy that we have is to inhibit the enzymes of degradation. This is a very interesting alternative because we can increase the level of endocannabinoids at a local site, and in this case we can prolong the effect of the endocannabinoids and their protective effects. This is, of course, pharmacologically interesting, and maybe this is the explanation because in the last several years, cannabinoids formulations have been appeared for the treatment of several diseases, and is behind development of the cold medicine cannabis that have been used by patients. One of the properties of the cannabinoids is neuroprotective effects, that the use of cannabinoids have important role in the preservation and the rescue and repair of several neurons, but also real defense against cytotoxic insults. But what is the advantages of to use cannabinoids if we compare with other neuroprotective compounds? First is that cannabinoids have a broad spectrum profile that is determined by their activity at multiple molecular sites and against numerous cytotoxic events that you can see in the slide that could be interesting for several disorders. Second is that cannabinoids can exert neuroprotection but also neurorepair. It is important in the disorders with great damage at the time of diagnosis. The third reason is when we use cannabinoids, we are mimicking or reproducing an endogenous response. And it's important for our talk to know it, is that endocannabinoid signaling has been postulated as an endogenous phytoprotective system. When a damage occurs, there is always present, or commonly present, an increase of the levels of endocannabinoids, expression of neurotrophic factor, and commonly is always observed a decrease in inflammatory mediators and cytotoxicity. The fourth reason is when we use cannabinoids, we can modulate important elements in the central nervous system and in the periphery because the targets, the elements, are located in key cellular substrates, for example, for neural homeostasis and for survival. We can modulate the activity of neurons, astrocytes, and microglia at the same time. Moreover, we know in the literature that numerous studies have been shown positive effects when we use cannabinoids, both in vivo or in vitro, and in acute or chronic neurodegeneration. As you can see in the slide, we have this data accumulated for brain trauma, ischemia, spinal injury, or as you see here, in chronic disorders too. But with this summary, what we know about ALS and cannabinoids, as we see during this workshop, we know that the molecular mechanisms or the ALS are not clear. But there is a consensus about some pathological mechanisms that are accepted, and glutamate toxicity, glial activation, mitochondrial dysfunction, oxidative stress, or protein aggregate. But with this, what can do the cannabinoids in ALS? The first that we can do is modulate the activity or the role of the astrocyte in the homeostasis with the neurons. We can increase neurotrophic support and increase the anti-inflammatory mediators enhanced by the action of astrocytes via CB1 or CB2 receptor. Second, we can decrease cytotoxicity because with the action of cannabinoids in the CB1 receptor, we can decrease glutamate release. Second, we can regulate to the action in astrocyte via increasing the glutamate reuptake. The third action that we can do with cannabinoids is decrease toxicity via mediated the activity in the microglial cells. In this occasion, we can modulate this pro-inflammatory and anti-inflammatory mediator release by the action of modulating the CB2 receptor and the GPR. Another important key element in ALS and in other related diseases is oxidative stress, and with the action of cannabinoids, we can decrease the oxidative stress directly, decreasing the levels of reactive oxygen species, or indirectly for several important pathways. And this is need to be confirmed, but the presence of the endocannabinoid elements in the muscle fibers, in the muscle, it is postulating that have been an important role in in which when we treat with cannabinoids, we can exert positive effects in the muscle and weakness too. In this sense, it has been postulated that cannabinoids may be useful at the same time at different pathological mechanisms that occur during disease progression. Well, that we want to present is to study the role of one of the key elements, the CD2 receptor, in ALS. This is for our experience and the previous data in the literatures with other disorders. But to be sure about our results, we want to use several animal models on patient samples. We want to refer to genetic modification and pharmacological treatments. When we start, in the moment that we start working with ALS, there are some data, a few of them, that report promising results treating with several agonists, full or partial agonists of the endocannabinoid system, and they show that they can extend a little bit the standing life span. But there was no data about how the endocannabinoid system was during this exploration of what was the role. For this purpose, as I mentioned, we start with the characterization of the endocannabinoid system in several animal models and patient samples. I start with the first more common, that is one mice model. Only to remember that this model is characterized by decreased motor impairment, loss of motor neurons, and increased the glial activity. And when we analyze these animals as symptomatic time, we see that we have, as expected, increased levels of CD2 receptor in females, but also in males with no change in the other elements of the endocannabinoid system. Moreover, in males, we have we obtain increase in the levels of the cytokine synthesis in NAPE that it was agreed with previous results for other groups that they report increased levels of endocannabinoids. As I mentioned before, it's a signal of a neuroprotective effect. But we want to know where is located this CD2 receptor in what type of glial cells. And as you can see here, we found that the most important colocalization of this signal was located in astrocyte in these mice, what not can discard other cells that could be implicated by astrocyte. In this case, it was the most prominent. The second was to prove this result in another animal model, the TDP43. And as I commented before, this is a motor impairment, characterized by motor impairment, loss of motor neurons, and increase in the microglial cells. In this time, we want to try the effect of the endocannabinoid system during this exploration, and we chose two states of the disease, a pre-symptomatic state at 70 days, early symptomatic, and a post-symptomatic state. And as you can see here in the slide, again, we have a very strong upregulation in both gender and in the two states of the disease, and the increase was most prominent that we found in the SOD1 mice model. And this was corroborated by not only RT-PCR, by Western blot analysis. And in this case, in the females, post-symptomatic, we found a decrease in the FA signal that is agreed with the our data with endocannabinoid levels, but the data that not shown here. To be sure about the role, it is the same in one model to other. We want to compare, and the CB2 receptor in this time was located with mainly with the microglia in this mice model. We found a colocalization with the astrocyte, but was less signal. The more important was in this model was in the microglia test. To continue to this characterization, this was not in our schedule, but we have the opportunity to obtain certain samples of a spontaneous model, this is in canine model, that is called canine degenerative neuropathy, that share a lot of similarities with the ELS, or the ELS model. The first is that this animal has a mutation in the SOD1 gene, and as you can see here in this slide, there are several stages of disease progression that correspond a little bit with the progression of our mice model and also in passing. They have affected in both upper and motor and lower motor neurons. Well, we have the opportunity, as I comment, to analyze this data from a brain bank of Professor Boates in USA. And we want to be sure that we have a good model. This animal have loss of motor neurons and increase the level of the glial activity. And when we analyze the endocannabinoid system, we again find the same result. We saw that there was no change in any element of the endocannabinoid system, but a strong, again, upregulation of the CB2 receptor by RT-PCR, iVirus, and by Western analysis. And with respect to where these CB2 receptors were located in this animal model, we found that we found in the SOD1 mice model, CB2 receptor was located in astrocytes of this model, with no signal of colocalization in the astrocyte, in the microglial cells. To get with this first study, we want to be sure and to analyze passing samples. But there was a previous report that was increased in the CB2 receptor in the spinal cord. But I can show you our results with other areas. This is the motor cortex that never was, it's the first time that that was reviewed. And we see here that there was no find any motor degeneration or motor neuron loss, but as you can see here, there was an increase in the EVA1 immunofluorescence and GFP immunofluorescence signal. And again, we have found the same result in the motor cortex. There was a upregulation of the CB2 receptor. And an interesting result that we obtained is that they was located in astrocytes mainly, but also in the neurons, in the motor neurons, in the motor cortex. This is a tricky thing because in our field, the expression of the CB2 receptor in neurons was not affected for a long time. It was a very controversial issue. But now it's well established that the presence of the CB2 receptor in neurons are present only under pathological conditions. With this result, we can conclude that CB2 receptor of this motor cortex was damaged, although we have not observed loss of motor neurons. To summarize this part of the characterization, we have glial elements. The CD2 receptor was upregulated in glial elements of neurons and spinal cord, in glial elements of this animal model, and in glial elements in a spinal cord of two genetic neurons models of Als. With this in context, we want to know what is the role of the CD2 receptor in ALS. Our experience in other neurodegenerative disorders suggests that could be a possible accumulation protective against injury. And for this purpose, we want to test with a genetic ablation of the CD2 receptor with a mice model. The second question that we want to answer is that the CD2 receptor could be a potential target for ALS therapy. To start with this second part of the talk, we are going to show you our result, our genetic modification. For this study, we crossed CD2 cow mice with the TDP43 mice. If our hypothesis was correct, we have to decrease or to find a deterioration and accelerate delay progression in the disease. And as you can see in this slide, we have an accelerated and aggravated phenotype of the double transgenic cow mice that is described in red, and they have a less percentage of survival, and shows that the CD2 receptor is in fact something that is protecting our system. And if we analyze the histological samples of these mice, we found the same result to decrease the number of motor neurons during the disease and increase the levels of the glial, the neuroinflammation of the astrocytes, but also in the microglia. That is more evident during the early stage of the disease, that this represents that the genetic ablation of the CD2 receptor is accelerating that disease progression. And finally, we want to show you our data with the pharmacological treatments. We chose to use full agonist of the CD2 receptor, the A308, that is very potent. And after several days of treatment, you can see as the agonist of the CD2 receptor is producing attenuation of the reduction in the body weight, and also is we have a better response in the rotor performance, and you can see here when we treat with this owl. When we analyze these samples, we obtain this result that you can see here is practically restore the levels of motor neurons. We protect the neurons to die, and also decrease the levels of astrocytes and the microglia. This is the total number of astrocytes and microglia, but for the next step, we want to be sure what type of microglia and astrocytes are activated, are decreased in the activation. And for this purpose, we use histological procedure to study the morphology of this type of cells, in this time astrocytes. And as you can see here, the treatment with the agonist is increasing the number of the activated GFP positive cells, with no change in the total number of GFP. This is something similar that we found with the EVA1 response, we are exactly the same response that our treatment is decreasing the activated IVA1 positive cells. To summarize our results, we see that the CV2 receptor have increased in all the animal models that we have tested with several differences between them. We have an increase in the SOD1, in the canine, and in the TDP43 in the astrocyte, and in the TDP43 in the microglial cells. We have seen that there is an increase in the CV2 receptor in the spinal cord and in the motor cortex, mainly in the astrocyte, and the presence of the CV2 receptor in neurons, that is particularly interesting. And when we perform a genetic modification with the ablation of the CV2 receptor, when we cross with the TTP transgenic mice, we found that the lifespan was decreased and we obtained an increase in the And finally, we found that the treatment with a full agonist, A2, 300A, we have now some other studies that we have, or previous results for other groups. We can decrease the level of the glial activity and we increase the neural survival. But before to end this talk, we want to talk about our new direction, our pharmacological new direction. As I commented before, the endocannabinoid system is increasing our knowledge about possible targets. And recently, PPR gamma have appeared as a promising target in the field. We test this compound that is a derivative of a cannabidiol. It's a compound it's a plant-derived compound with several modifications. And with this modification, we obtain action only to the PPR gamma activator, but with no effect in the CV1 or CV2 receptor. As you can see, we obtained several promising results in the clinical study. In this time, we used the SOD1 mice model, recovering the claskin signal and some effects in the regular performance. But we found again this neuroprotective effect, only targeting the PPR gamma, recovering the number, increasing the number of reputational and motor neurons, and restoring the astrocyte signal, with no effect in the IVA1 signal. But as you remember, in this model, at least in our hands, there was more important the activation of the astrocytes. And something similar that we studied in the previous result with the previous compound, we analyzed the state of the activation of these astrocytes. We see that after the treatment with the compounds, the agonists of the PPR gamma, we found that they decrease the number of the activated astrocytes. For all of this reason, our new direction that I'm presently now performing is use dual combination that we want to target several elements at the same time, and we are using a combination of the CV2, the compounds that are targeting at the same time the CV2 receptor and PPR gamma, or the CV2 receptor and GPR55. This is something that is in progressing, and I like that in some other meetings we want to solve. To the end, I would like to number the names of the lab members. It's a big laboratory lab, increasing from for the last time a little bit. And here underlying is the personnel that are more related with ALS. But I'd like to thank you for their work. That is important for all this work that we are performing in the last year, and for the help with the organizing of this meeting too. And finally, this is our current funding that we are very acknowledged to them, because if we have no money, we have no, no science. Thank you all for your attention.
It's time for questions. Do you have any questions? No?
Thank you very much. You probably said it at the beginning of your talk, and I must have missed it, but I was wondering whether you monitored the levels of the endogenous ligands of your receptor, and whether this upregulation that you observed was maybe a response to decrease of those ligands, and how they are modulated during the disease.
Yeah, they are increasing during this exploration, but the analysis of the endocannabinoid is a little bit tricky, and sometimes we have no perfect data. We have very dispersion of the data, but there is a point that in all the cases there are an increase of an andamide, that is the main components, and the 2AG. That is something that is sounds bad, like another neurodegenerative disorder that is protected during disease, and it's the same that we found here. We are not performing this result in our lab. We have to collaborate, and the number of samples was a little bit small to be sure.
That was great, thank you. About 50% of our patients in California are on recreational, or not recreational, I'm sorry, medicinal, probably recreational now too, but medicinal marijuana. Would they get a drug effect from the levels that are achieved with medicinal marijuana? Would you expect that, or do you need to target this pathway in a different way in order to see what you think you've got in animals?
One of the objective to use CB2 receptor is to avoid this psychoactive effect, because CB2 receptor is in the periphery and in the central nervous system is only appear when under pathological condition, and there is no psychoactive effect. And this is for one of the reasons, because targeting CB2 receptor is a good option.
Okay, any more questions?
Eva, thank you for your presentation. Do you know if now in Spain or in Europe there is a drug, CB2 agonist in any laboratory for the access to the patient? Because some patients take cannabis from marijuana, and because they know about the studies and about the specificity. They take marijuana with neurocognition dose effects.
Yeah, I know that some of the patients are taking marijuana for treat some of the symptoms like spasticity, and in this case we're documented to use derivatives of the plant. In fact, we have other lines in the research that we are working only with derivatives of the plants, because it's true that it's more easy to translate to the clinic. But in this moment there is no compounds, for at least available for patients that are full agonists of the CB2 receptor. We are now in contact with companies, for example with Roche, that is very interesting to do new ligands based on the CB2 receptor activity, not only for ALS, for for multiple sclerosis too. And I hope that in the next year we can find or we can have a CD2 receptor drug, not plant-derived, available for patients.
Thank you.
More questions? Okay, thank you very much.